I've recently been enjoying wire-free gaming on my N64. Now, although I am close enough to easily just use a cabled controller anyway, using a wireless one does give you a bit of freedom. Plus there's no chance you're going to trip on the cable. But I'd only ever used the retrobit Tribute 64, and I have been wondering whether I'd been a bit harsh on it in my review. Yes, it does have rumble and it's a comfortable controller, but the N64 receiver really let it down for me. The thing is, I didn't have any other wireless N64 controllers to compare it to at the time. Well, that's all changed now, because I've got here the Brawler64 wireless gamepad. The Ultra Edition one. This is the one where you can swap out the typical N64 style gate with a modern rounded one. Now lots of people swear by the Brawler64 controllers about how comfortable they are, and this is my first opportunity to try one. So let's check it out. Hello fellow gamers, and well, just how ultra is the Brawler64? So, the Brawler64. People have been swearing by how comfortable this controller really is. And it came out a good 8 months before the retrobit wireless one, so it got quite a bit of a head start in the market. But at about the same time that retrobit released their wireless Tribute 64, Retro Fighters came out with the Ultra Edition. This one comes with a whole new colour scheme that matches the original Ultra 64 prototype when the N64 was first announced. You're also able to change the joystick gate so you've got a circular one, just like the prototype controller did. So after so long of hearing about these things, I'm finally able to try it, so let's see what it's all about. Now this video is about the Ultra edition of the Brawler64, but as it happens I was able to pick up the original wireless model as well. So for the sake of the footage and comparisons and such, whenever you see me using the red one, you'll know that I'm using the regular N64 joystick gate. Whereas when you see me using the black one, it'll be when I was using it with the circular gate. And with that, let's take a closer look. And oh, these unboxings take so long, don't they? Ah, that's better. So inside the box you get the controller itself, of course. You get a USB A to C charging cable. You also get an extensive fold-out manual, a Retro Fighters keyring, which I'm quickly finding out is the norm with all of their controllers, and a gate remover tool, complete with an alternative joystick gate. We're going to check these out a little bit later. But first I'm having a look at the joystick, and you know what? It's in a good position. It's solid and it's comfortable with plenty of grip. Under my thumb I would say it feels better than retrobit's, but maybe it isn't quite as grippy as theirs. Also something I noticed is that this isn't the same joystick that Retro Fighters used for their Dreamcast controller. It's got a different shape, got a different size, and there's no plicky pressing on it. But, very much like their Dreamcast controller, the D-pad is nice and fat, and it's reassuringly clicky. Much better than retrobit offerings. I gave it a try with possibly the N64's most famous D-pad only title, Mischief Makers, and it was responsive, it was comfortable, it worked really well. Checking out the front face buttons now, and you know, they're all there. They're all easy enough to press. You'll notice that all of the buttons here are in a lighter shade of grey as opposed to blue, green and yellow. But I suppose there's one little detail here that they've missed out on. The C buttons, if they wanted this to be like the Ultra 64 prototype controller, the C buttons should have been a darker shade of grey. I'm just saying. The C buttons though, they are raised ever so slightly, which is noticeable when you're playing games. Especially those that use the C buttons as, you know, regular buttons rather than for camera control. And something that irked me is that the C buttons aren't lined up with the B and A buttons. It's more like they're positioned to be on the exact opposite of the controller to the joystick. They're slightly off to the side in their own little group. And on closer inspection you'll notice that there's a bit of a slanted gap between the two sets of buttons. Now at first you'd think this is probably fine. For anyone who's used the original controller for a significant length of time, you notice this and it does throw you off a little bit, as you can't as seamlessly move your thumb from the A-B buttons to the C's. Now coupled with the fact that the C buttons are raised ever so slightly, you'll find that your thumb is getting kind of caught on the edge of these C buttons when you're trying to move your thumb up to them. And as usual with many of Retro Fighters controllers, you've got here on the front the turbo function. You can assign turbo to pretty much any button at any time, and you can unset it very easily using that clear button. There's no special gimmick to the turbo on this, it's either on or off. You can't adjust it. Moving to the top where the shoulder buttons are, and this is something that retrobit had to correct for their wireless controller because they weren't in the right place on the original wired controller, whereas Retro Fighters knocked it out the park straight away. The layout here is similar to other modern third-party N64 controllers, with the L and R buttons on the front and the two Z buttons on the back. On the Brawler64, I found that these are positioned really well. I've had no problem trying to press any of these buttons with my fingers. Now the Z buttons, they do look like triggers, but don't be fooled, they're not. They're just regular buttons. Now for many, it does make sense to have the shoulder buttons positioned in this way, with the L and R at the front and the Zs at the back. And this layout is used on many third-party controllers. But that means that they all suffer from the same issue, where for many games you'll need to offset your fingers when you're using the shoulder buttons. This is obvious in such games as Lilac Wars, where you've got to press the Z button to tilt left and R to tilt right. Now everything I've covered here so far is applicable to both the Ultra and regular versions of the Brawler64 controller, but now we'll move on to something that's unique to the Ultra Edition. Now I mentioned earlier that the joystick gates can be changed on this model. That's where the gate remover tool comes into play. To change gates, just press it down around the joystick and turn anti-clockwise a little bit and it will release the gate. You can then simply slip it out and pop the new gate in its place. Use the tool again, turning slightly clockwise will lock it into place. Now using the regular gate as shown with the red controller here, it works really well. I was able to move in all directions very easily, and it does a good job of keeping me going in a straight line on both the X and Y axes as well as diagonally. Now I'm sure the gate isn't the same shape or size as the original controller, but it does the job. Switching over to the Ultra Edition and using that rounded gate, well, it definitely felt better for sure, and it was really helpful at times, such as when trying to do some fancy footwork in ISS 64. But if you change the joystick gate on this, don't forget to reset it. Like I did. So yeah, if you're changing the gate on this, you've got to reset it using the button combination that's in the manual. If you don't, it's not going to be set properly, and you'll find that you're not going to be able to reach all of the edges while you're playing games. One such example I've got recorded here is Mario. I've got him here circling a downed Bowser. I found that Mario moved a lot slower, especially when moving diagonally. So just remember to reset it, okay? But anyway, getting back to the controller, you'll see like with other wireless N64 controllers, there's no slot on the back for a memory card. This is done using the N64 receiver instead. Now the receiver itself, it's quite minimal actually. It plugs into an N64 port, it's got a slot on the front for a memory pack, and it's got a single red LED at the top. This will show whether you've got your controller synced or not. And as expected, it's not compatible with the transfer pack. But given how these are designed, even if it did support it, you wouldn't be able to use more than one in adjacent controller ports. There's just not enough room. So I went and tried this out with a few N64 titles and, well, on the whole, the controller is definitely more comfortable than retrobit's offering. It fits in my larger hands pretty much perfectly, and I especially like the properly sized D-pad. I can actually use my thumb with it rather than a toothpick. What I did find jarring, or perhaps more accurately not jarring, was the lack of rumble, especially in games where I would ordinarily expect it. There is no rumble support in this controller at all. But I suppose that's one less thing to break, isn't it? But on top of that, something that you've got to remember with this controller is that it's only for the N64. Well, unless you find yourself a compatible USB adapter for it. It doesn't have the flexibility of the retrobit controller to connect wirelessly with a USB dongle. Although, incidentally, very recently Retro Fighters did release a USB version of this same controller, so if you'd rather use it on your computer or on a console with USB, you'd have to go for that version instead. But to summarise, you know, I get what people are on about. This is certainly a very comfortable controller. It fits in my big hands really well, and also the way we're able to change the gates, it's really well implemented on this Ultra Edition, as some games do actually benefit from this. The obvious downside, of course, is the lack of the rumble like most other wireless N64 controllers at the moment, which is something that I'm thankful is featured in the retrobit controller, albeit kind of reluctantly. Watch my other video on it to see why. The only way to get rumble on a Brawler64 controller is to go for the wired one, as that has the port on the back to support a rumble pack. And since that one comes with a massive 10-foot cable on it, you will be slightly hard pressed to justify the wireless model, unless you have to be further than 10 foot up in your N64, I mean. To top it off, this won't work with anything other than the N64, at least not without a specialised dongle which, after some investigating, I'd have to import from the States. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, just recently Retrofight has even released a USB version of this controller, and it's at the same price. So basically, Retrofighters are saying to us that either they can't, or they won't, make this work with regular, like 2.4 GHz USB dongles, so I can't realistically use this on my Switch, for example, if I wanted to. But you know what? This is fine. I've got alternatives. So there you have it, the Ultra Edition of the Brawler64 wireless gamepad. Now, if you are after one of these, I've left a link in the description down below to where I got mine. Now, I'm still waiting for more third-party retro controllers to be delivered, so there will be more videos like this in the future when they arrive. If you want to see how those turn out, feel free to subscribe down below. And of course, let everyone know down below in the comments if you've been spotting the Brawler64. But with that, I'm going to sign off, so thanks very much for watching. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and I'll catch you all next time.